In a quiet region of space, far away from any war or destruction, the planet Forel glowed like a green jewel, orbiting its twin suns. Home to the Voth, a peaceful and intelligent species, the planet was a place of harmony, calm winds, and minds filled with curiosity. The Voth had not known war for centuries. They had explored galaxies, cataloged stars, built great libraries of knowledge, and shared ideas with other peaceful races. They believed understanding was always better than conflict. But there was one species they had never encountered face to face: humans. Stories of the human race had traveled through space like dark whispers. Some claimed they were fierce warriors who would never back down. Others said they were unpredictable, emotional, and dangerous, but brilliant in ways no one else could understand. Most of these stories were unconfirmed. The Voth Council always dismissed them as myths or exaggerations. After all, no one had seen a human ship in Voth space. That changed one quiet night. Inside the Great Voth Observatory, a lone analyst named Axila was monitoring deep space signals, searching for patterns among the stars. She was young and curious, known for her sharp mind and calm voice. Her job was routine, sometimes boring, but she enjoyed the silence. On that night, her screen flickered with a strange pattern, one she had never seen before. The signal was not random. It repeated every few seconds, like a heartbeat. Scylla leaned closer, her fingers dancing across the controls, trying to trace the source. As the data loaded, her eyes widened. The signal was artificial. It was not Voth, not any known species. It was coming from outside their mapped territory, far, far beyond their comfort zone. Her heart began to beat faster as she decoded part of the message. There, buried within the static, was a symbol she had only seen in ancient warning files: the human emblem. She immediately alerted the High Council. Within minutes, senior scholars and defense coordinators filled the observatory. The signal was played again and again, and all doubts were erased. It was human. The message was brief and direct, a single sentence repeated over and over. "This is Captain Rook of the Terran warship Vigilant. We come in peace. Respond." The name Rook was unknown, but the words Terran warship sent a cold silence through the room. The humans had not only entered deep space, but they were also trying to make contact. The council fell into deep discussion. Should they respond? Should they ignore it and hope the humans passed by? Or worse, what if ignoring it was seen as a sign of weakness? Scylla stood quietly, listening, until her voice finally rose above the others. "We have always chosen understanding. If we fear them without knowing them, then we become what we fear." Her words struck a chord, and the council, after long hours, decided to respond. But they needed someone to represent them. Someone calm, smart, and not driven by fear. They chose Scylla. At first, she was shocked. She was not a diplomat, not trained for first contact, but the council believed her honesty and calm nature would serve them better than rehearsed speeches. She accepted with quiet determination, hiding the storm of emotions inside her. Her small vessel was prepared in secret, and soon she was launched into the unknown, guided only by the signal's direction. The stars around her grew darker as she left Voth territory. The silence of space felt heavier now. As her ship moved closer to the origin of the signal, strange energy readings began to appear. Her scanners picked up something massive ahead, too large to be a trade vessel, too organized to be natural. Then she saw it. Hanging in space like a silent beast was the Terran warship Vigilant. It was black and silver, covered with thick armor and strange weapons she could not recognize. It looked like it had been built for only one purpose: survival in a hostile universe. Her breath caught in her throat. This was not just a ship. It was a symbol of everything the Voth were not. Her communication system buzzed with a low tone. A deep voice spoke through the static. "Unidentified vessel, you are approaching a Terran military ship. Identify yourself immediately." Scylla swallowed her fear and answered in the calmest voice she could manage. "This is Scylla of the Voth. I come in peace, responding to your message." There was silence. Then the voice returned, more relaxed this time. "Welcome, Scylla. I am Captain Rook. Prepare to dock. No harm will come to you." The words were polite, but the voice carried weight, like someone used to giving orders in the middle of chaos. As her ship moved closer to the warship, she could see details that made her nervous. Turrets that moved quietly, eyes of machines watching her every move, and marks along the hull that looked like scars from past battles. The humans had clearly seen war and survived it. When she finally docked and stepped into the human vessel, the air felt colder, heavier. Metal walls surrounded her, and armed guards stood silently, though none aimed their weapons. Then she saw him, Captain Rook. He was tall, with sharp eyes and a calm expression. His uniform was clean, but his face had the look of someone who had lived through storms. He nodded once. "You're braver than most. Not many would come alone to a warship." Scylla replied, trying to hide her unease. "We believe in peace, even when others prepare for war." He smiled slightly. "Then you'll find humans. Complicated." In that moment, standing in the middle of a ship built for battle, surrounded by people who had seen the worst of the universe, Isla realized the signal had not just carried a message. It had carried a warning and a promise. A warning that the humans had arrived, and a promise that everything was about to change. Whether for good or bad, no one could yet say. But deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning of a story that would reshape the galaxy. As Tyla stood on the metal floor of the Terran warship Vigilant, her senses were overwhelmed by the strange and sharp energy in the air. The temperature was colder than what she was used to on Vorel, and the atmosphere was filled with the scent of steel, oil, and something unfamiliar, perhaps determination or the residue of old battles. She tried not to let her fear show, but every step she took echoed loudly, reminding her that she was far from home, alone among a species known only through whispers and warnings. The human guards who accompanied her were silent, their expressions unreadable behind the dark visors of their helmets. They did not speak unless spoken to, but their eyes followed every move she made. It was not aggression, it was control. Everything here was carefully arranged, as if one misstep could activate a hidden defense system. Despite her calm appearance, Sila's thoughts raced. She had trained for first contact scenarios, but never with humans, and never aboard a ship like this. The Vigilant didn't feel like a vessel of peace. It felt like a weapon, breathing quietly as it waited for a reason to awaken. Captain Rook led her through the long corridors without saying much. His steps were steady, and he carried himself like someone used to command. His uniform was simple but decorated with strange marks and colored bands. His eyes, sharp and focused, scanned every room before they entered. When they finally reached a large chamber, he gestured for her to enter. The room was round, dimly lit, and filled with various screens showing data she couldn't fully understand. Numbers, star maps, and security feeds. In the center stood a metal table with 2 chairs. Rook sat down without hesitation and looked at her with curiosity, not fear. Scylla slowly took her seat, her mind alert but composed. Rook's first words surprised her. "Tell me, what made your people decide to answer our signal?" His tone was calm, but there was a hint of challenge behind it. Scylla replied softly but clearly, "Because we do not believe in judging others without knowing them. We believe peace begins with listening." The captain leaned back slightly, studying her face. "That's rare," he said after a pause. "Most species hide when they hear about us. Some even run." Scylla nodded. "Many fear what they do not understand. That fear often becomes danger. We chose not to run from that." Rook seemed to consider her answer for a moment, then asked a question that took her off guard. "Are you afraid of us, Tyla?" There was a silence before she responded. "I would be foolish not to feel fear, but fear does not mean distrust. It means caution, not surrender." A smile tugged at the corner of Rook's mouth, almost invisible. "That's the most honest answer I've heard in years." As the conversation continued, Tyla began to notice small differences in how the humans communicated. They didn't use as many words as the Voth. They valued directness, efficiency, and strength, even in speech. Yet behind their rough edges was something deeper, an emotional current that never stayed still. Humans, she realized, were always thinking ahead, always calculating what came next. They seemed ready for danger even during peaceful talks. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival. Rook told her a little about the human journey, how Earth had once been divided, how wars had nearly destroyed them, how unity only came after great loss. He didn't speak of these things with sadness, but with pride, as if each scar was a reminder of what they had overcome. "We're not perfect," he admitted, "but we never stop moving forward." When Scylla asked him why they had sent out the signal in the first place, his answer revealed something she had not expected. "Because we're tired of being alone," he said. "We've crossed galaxies, fought threats no one else would face, but what's the point of surviving if you have no one to speak to?" That line stayed with her. She had come expecting a cold, emotionless leader, someone hardened by endless war, but she saw a different side now. Captain Rook was not just a warrior. He was someone who carried the weight of choices made far beyond a battlefield. Scylla began to understand the human paradox, a race built for conflict, yet always hoping for peace. Later, Rook took her on a guided tour of the ship. She saw training rooms where humans practiced combat with frightening intensity, engine rooms filled with glowing machinery that pulsed with raw energy, and even a small garden area, hidden deep inside the vessel, where real plants from Earth grew under artificial light. "We carry a bit of home wherever we go," he explained. It was a soft moment in the middle of all the steel and shadow. When they entered the observation deck, Scylla was stunned by the view. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass, and below them floated a giant gas planet with swirling blue storms. It was beautiful, and for a few minutes, they both stood in silence, simply watching. No weapons, no words, just two beings from different worlds looking at the same sky. Before she left, Rook gave her a small object, a silver badge marked with the Terran symbol. "A gift," he said, "not a threat, just a memory of today." Scylla accepted it with both hands. Her mind was filled with new thoughts, questions, and feelings she hadn't expected. When she returned to her ship, she sat in silence for a long time before activating her report transmission. She didn't know what the council would say. Some might think she was too trusting. Others might believe the humans were too dangerous. But in her heart, she knew the truth. The first contact had not been what she feared. It had been something more. Something dangerous, yes, but also strangely hopeful. She didn't know what the future would hold between the Voth and the humans, but she knew this. They were not monsters. They were not myths. They were real. And they were powerful, not just in weapons, but in will. As her ship pulled away from the warship Vigilant, she looked back one last time. The Terran ship remained silent, like a sleeping giant among the stars, but now it felt less like a threat and more like a challenge. A challenge to understand them, to learn from them, and maybe, one day, to stand beside them in a galaxy that was growing more dangerous with each passing year. Scylla could not stop thinking about her time aboard the Terran ship Vigilant. The conversation with Captain Rook had opened a door in her mind that she had never expected to walk through. Every word he said, every expression he made, kept repeating in her thoughts like an unsolved puzzle. Her people had always warned her about humans, that they were unpredictable, aggressive, and dangerously clever. But now she had seen something different. They were not just soldiers or survivors. They were dreamers too, carrying the weight of pain, history, and hope in equal parts. As her ship returned to the neutral space station orbiting the twin moons of Ikara, Scylla prepared for the diplomatic report she would present to the Voth High Council. But just as she began to organize her thoughts, a coded message arrived from the Vigilant. It was short and direct. We request a response to our proposal. A test of trust. Will you accept the challenge? Zyla read the message twice. There was no threat, no demand, but something about the word challenge made her pulse rise. She didn't know what it meant, but one thing was clear. This was not just diplomacy anymore. This was personal. Back on the station, the news of the Terran request spread quickly among the council members. Some called it a trap. Others said it was a trick to lure them into a political game. But Tyla stood firm. I was there, she said calmly. I looked into their eyes. This is not war. This is something else. They are testing us, not with weapons, but with trust. After much debate, the council reluctantly agreed to let her accept the challenge, but only if she did so alone. No guards, no weapons, no backup. The risk was high, but Scylla knew the cost of fear was even greater. Within hours, she was once again aboard a transport, heading toward a mysterious Terran location they called Outpost Echo, deep in the asteroid fields near Sector 19. The journey felt longer this time, and silence filled the cabin like a heavy fog. She wondered what kind of test they had prepared for her, and what message the humans were truly trying to send. When she arrived, Outpost Echo didn't look like a military base at all. It was small, isolated, and surrounded by rotating debris and glowing rocks. The atmosphere inside was different from the Vigilant, less formal, less threatening. As she stepped out, Captain Rook was already waiting. But this time, he was dressed in a simpler uniform and carried no weapon. His face was serious, but his eyes held a strange kind of respect. "Welcome," he said. "Thank you for coming." Scylla bowed her head slightly. "What is the challenge?" she asked. Rook pointed toward a long tunnel lit by small blinking lights. "Follow me. It's not something I can explain. You have to see it for yourself." She followed without hesitation, her mind alert. Every sound echoed in the narrow metal corridor, and her heartbeat grew louder with each step. They passed rooms with strange equipment, holograms of unknown star systems, and locked doors that whispered of secrets untold. Finally, they entered a wide chamber with a large viewing screen on one side and a glass wall on the other. Behind the glass was a creature, tall, thin, with dark skin like polished stone, and eyes that burned with red light. It was chained, but it didn't look weak. It looked aware. Rook turned to her, his voice quiet. "This is the last of its kind. Axarn, the species that tried to wipe us out during the border wars. It killed hundreds before we captured it. And now it refuses to speak to anyone." Scylla frowned. "And what does this have to do with your challenge?" Rook stepped closer to the glass. "We want to know if it will speak to you." She stared at him, confused. "Why me?" He replied without looking at her. "Because you're not us, and because that Axarn may see in you something it refuses to see in us. Someone not blinded by revenge." The air grew cold. Scylla understood now. The humans were asking her to face a creature of war, to risk her life in a sealed room, not because they wanted entertainment or control, but because they were looking for answers in places they couldn't reach themselves. After a long pause, Scylla nodded. "Open the door." Alarms blinked silently as the door slid open, and she stepped inside. The Xarn turned its head slowly, eyes glowing like fire, and a low sound vibrated from its chest. She stood tall, hiding her fear. "I am not here to fight," she said. "I came to listen." The creature didn't move. Zyla spoke again, softer. "You've been silent for years. Why now? Why keep living if you've already given up?" Minutes passed. Then, in a deep, growling voice, the Xarn spoke. "You are not human." Zyla stayed still. "No, I am Voth, and I want to understand." The Xarn laughed quietly. "They sent you to test me," she answered honestly. "No, They sent me to test themselves." That response surprised the creature. It tilted its head. "They fear me," it said, "and yet they feed me, heal me, let me live." Scylla nodded. "Because humans are not what the stories say. They are more than fear. They are trying to become something better." The Xarn stared at her for a long time. "And what are you?" it asked. Scylla thought before answering. "I am someone who came here expecting to witness violence. But instead, I found a challenge of peace." The creature closed its eyes. "Then you are a fool. Or brave. Perhaps both." And with that, it returned to silence. Hyla left the room slowly, her heart pounding. Captain Rook was waiting. "It spoke," he said, surprised. She gave a small nod. "It still hates you. But it doesn't hate the idea of hope." Rook looked away, then said something she would never forget. "That's all we needed to know." As Styla boarded her ship to return, she realized the humans had never wanted control or power in this test. They wanted understanding. They had offered her a piece of their fear, trusted her with a truth they had kept hidden from the galaxy, and asked for nothing in return. That was the real challenge. Not a battle of strength, but a trial of belief. And now she carried a new responsibility, to share what she had seen with those who still doubted, and to remember that peace does not come from silence, but from choosing to speak even when fear surrounds you. Tyla stood in front of the central hall of the Voth Council, her voice calm but her heart burning with everything she had seen and learned. She had returned from the human outpost with a mind full of questions and a memory that wouldn't let go of the Xarn's voice or Captain Rook's final words. Her report was detailed, honest, and full of things the council did not want to hear. Many elders whispered that she had been manipulated by the humans, that she had fallen for their tricks, that the so-called challenge was just a performance to impress her. But Scylla didn't step back. She told them clearly, this was not about human cleverness or alien weakness. It was about change. And that truth scared them more than any war. As her words echoed through the great chamber, a deep silence followed. Then came the backlash. She was accused of being too emotional, of risking the safety of the Voth Empire, of suggesting that peace was even possible. And when she tried to speak again, they silenced her. That was the moment she realized. This was going to be a fight. Not a fight of weapons or violence, but of voices, of truth against fear, of a single belief against an entire system built on caution and control. A day later, her access was revoked. Her missions were canceled. Her status as an envoy was suspended for evaluation. But Scylla did not stop. If the council would not listen, others might. She reached out to young explorers, former diplomats, curious minds across nearby systems, sharing what she had witnessed and what it meant. Slowly, a small group gathered around her. They called themselves the Watchers, not because they waited, but because they observed what others ignored. And as more began to hear her story, the council grew nervous. Then, the breaking point came. A human ship, a peaceful vessel, unarmed, entered Voth space, responding to a call Hyla hadn't even sent. Captain Rook himself stepped out, walking directly into Voth territory, with no weapons, no soldiers, just trust. It was a bold move, maybe even a dangerous one, but it was also a message. And the council responded the only way they knew how. They ordered his arrest. That night, everything changed. Xyla, now considered a traitor by the council, watched from a hidden chamber deep inside the old city as security forces moved toward the human ship. Her thoughts raced. She knew what would happen if Rook was taken. Any hope of peace would be destroyed. The humans would never forget such betrayal. And even if they didn't strike back, the walls of trust that had taken so long to build would collapse. She couldn't let that happen. So she did the unthinkable. She contacted the underground data syndicate that still supported free knowledge. She hacked into the planetary alert system. And she sent one message, short, clear, and impossible to ignore. The humans came in peace. We fight not them, but our fear. The message spread like wildfire. Public screens lit up. Citizens froze. Even some security units stopped in their tracks. Confusion spread fast. But Scylla didn't stop. She broadcast the full footage from her encounter with the Ktarn. She released Rook's message. She gave the people everything the council had hidden. And now, the real fight began, not in the streets, but in the minds of the people. Captain Rook, still standing calmly beside his ship, looked around as Voth citizens gathered. No one moved to arrest him. Some looked curious, others afraid, but not one raised a weapon. The council, panicking, sent out elite guards to take control of the situation. But something had shifted. Even among the guards, there were doubts. And then, without warning, the skies turned red. A fleet, unknown, silent, dark as space itself, appeared just beyond the Voth orbit. Not human, not Voth, something else. The alarms screamed across the city. And just like that, the focus changed. From politics to survival, the council sent calls for defense. Ships were activated, but they were unprepared. The unknown fleet moved fast, disabling systems, targeting command centers, cutting communication lines. That's when Scylla made her decision. She ran straight to the human ship. Inside, Rook was already coordinating with his crew. "They're not responding to hails," he said, eyes fixed on the screen. "This isn't a raid. It's a warning. Someone doesn't want peace." Scylla stepped forward. "Can we fight them?" Rook turned to her slowly. "We can try, but not alone." She nodded. "Then let's not be alone." She opened a channel to the remaining Voth fleet and made her plea. "This is not the time to argue. This is not about humans or Voth. This is about survival. Fight with us, or we fall alone." For a second, no response. Then, one by one, Voth captains answered. They would follow her lead, side by side with the humans. The fight that followed was fast and brutal. The unknown enemy had technology beyond anything either species had seen. But the humans had something else: instinct, unpredictability, and a will to adapt under pressure. And the Voth, following Scylla's orders, didn't hesitate. For the first time in history, the two races fought together. Shields overlapped, weapons synchronized, pilots protected each other. And though the cost was high, and ships burned across the skies, they won. The enemy fleet, shocked by the unity, withdrew without a word. No demands, no messages, just silence. But it was enough. The Voth Council could no longer deny what had happened. Their own people had seen the truth. Peace with humans was not only possible, it had saved them. Scylla and Rook stood together once more, but this time not as an envoy and a visitor, but as leaders of something greater. The fight was not just against enemies from the stars. It had been a fight against old fears, against silence, against the belief that change was too dangerous to try. And in that fight, they had won something greater than victory. They had earned trust. After the battle that had shaken the skies and tested the limits of trust between two civilizations, the Voth homeworld was no longer the same. The unknown enemy had disappeared, leaving only wreckage and deep questions in their wake, but their brief presence had changed everything. Now, humans and Voth had something neither had expected: a shared memory of war, of survival, of standing side by side. Yet the dust hadn't even settled when whispers began to rise again within the council chambers. Some still feared the humans, claiming that cooperation was a trap, that unity had been a necessity, not a choice. But outside those walls, in the streets and the skies, the truth was alive. Young Voth engineers worked with human scientists, exchanging ideas that had been locked away by fear for generations. Soldiers from both sides told stories, not of enemies, but of comrades. Pilots who had flown next to human ships spoke of their bravery, their strange but powerful tactics, and their unbreakable will. Even children had begun drawing pictures showing humans and Voth together, fighting monsters, building new homes, dreaming of stars that belonged to everyone. In the middle of all this, Thyla moved quietly but firmly, speaking wherever she was called, not as a rebel, not as a dismissed envoy, but as someone who had seen what most were too afraid to believe. Captain Rook, still commanding his ship in orbit, worked closely with her, guiding conversations that were often filled with suspicion and confusion. But the more they spoke, the more the fear faded, replaced by a growing curiosity, even hope. The change wasn't fast, but it was steady, like a seed growing under stone, breaking through because it could no longer be denied. One morning, something unexpected happened. A signal came from deep space, not from the humans, not from the Voth, but from the same unknown species that had attacked them. But this time, it was not an attack. It was a message, simple, quiet, and almost too calm. We watched. You changed. Now we speak. The entire system held its breath. For days, no one moved. The Voth Council froze all foreign travel. Human ships were told to remain in orbit. And then, with no warning, a small vessel appeared in orbit, dark and round like a moon carved by hands long dead. It asked for permission to land. And Thyla was the first to say yes. The council screamed protest. They said it was too soon, too risky. But the people, having seen the humans prove their honor, listened to her. And Rook stood beside her again. Together, they approached the ship when it landed, not with weapons, but with translators and open hands. The ship opened like a flower, revealing creatures unlike any they had seen. Tall, thin, glowing with patterns on their skin that moved like waves. The aliens called themselves the Ilari, and their voice was not made of sound but thought, echoing in the minds of those around them. You survived what many do not. You chose to stand together. You passed a test not meant for you. And so we speak. Shock rippled through every corner of the Voth world and the human fleet. A test. A challenge designed by an ancient race to see if others could rise beyond fear. The Ilari explained that they had observed many worlds, watching how species reacted to the unknown, to danger, to each other. Most failed. They turned on themselves. They destroyed potential alliances in fear of betrayal. But humans and Voth, even through mistrust and pain, had managed something rare. They fought together. They protected each other. And most of all, they learned. The Ilari had not expected that. They had planned only to observe and leave. But now, they offered something greater. Knowledge, connection, history, secrets of stars so old even the galaxies had forgotten them. But it came with a condition, not for war, not for control, but for continued unity. Alone, you are strong, the Ilari said, but together, you are a future. The offer was made not to the governments, but to the people. And the response was overwhelming. Messages of support came from every corner of the Voth colonies, from human outposts, from ships drifting between stars. People wanted to understand. They wanted to learn. They wanted to grow. As time passed, a great hall was built at the edge of the first city, an open circle with no doors, no guards, no walls to divide. It was named the Chamber of Understanding. Inside, Voth, humans, and even a few Ilari met regularly, not just to make deals or sign papers, but to talk, to ask questions, to share memories. It was here that a child, half Voth, half human, stood and asked the most powerful question of all. If we are so different, why do I feel like both? And the room went silent, not because they didn't have an answer, but because they all realized they were living it. This new world wasn't about forgetting the past or ignoring the scars. It was about choosing to heal. The council was reshaped, not overthrown, not destroyed, but reformed with new voices, scientists, pilots, farmers, storytellers, even former critics who had learned to listen. Thyla was named the first speaker, not as a ruler, but as a guide, someone who had once walked alone and now stood with everyone. Rook was honored too, but he declined any title, preferring to keep flying, exploring, and reporting back with new wonders and old lessons. The Illyri stayed in the background, offering advice only when asked, always watching, always listening. And while threats still existed beyond the stars, and not every race welcomed peace, the alliance between humans and Voth stood as a bright light in the galaxy, a rare example of what could happen when trust won over fear. In the end, it was not technology, not weapons, not even ancient wisdom that changed the course of history. It was understanding. The quiet, powerful choice to see each other not as enemies, not as strangers, but as fellow travelers in the same vast unknown. And that was the beginning of something far greater than anyone had expected.